Call the assembly meeting to order, please.
Hello, everybody. We're getting the meeting started.
So I'm going to call this meeting to order at 6:01, 3? Okay. This is a special meeting for Tuesday, January 17th, 2023. Madam Clerk, would you take the roll?
I will. Tim Hale.
Here.
Stephanie Nowers.
Here.
Dee McKee. Robert Yunt.
Here.
Moki Tu.
Here.
Ron Bernier.
Here.
Madam Mayor, you have a quorum.
Okay. Are there any changes to the agenda? Hearing none, the agenda is approved as presented. We all stand for the pledge. Deputy Mayor, would you lead us, please?
Pledge allegiance
To the flag
of
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The next item on our agenda is audience participation. And I do have a sign-up sheet, but there will also be a chance, if you haven't been able to sign up, for you to be able to testify. So Julie, there you are. You're first on the list, lady.
Hello, I am Julie Pollard, and I live at 4280 North Ryder in Palmer. I'm also volunteer to help with the voting. I personally think that we need to hand count because folks do not trust the Dominion machines at all. When we were up at the Alpine station, we had a high turnout, a very high turnout, and folks were not picking up all their ballots like they were supposed to, or they got frustrated. We had one gentleman rip up his ballot right at soon as he saw the Dominion machine, and that was it. I know that it costs quite a bit, but we need to know too, what does it cost to lease these machines? What does it cost to store these machines to offset what you've shown here? Which, yes, it costs quite a bit, but is the offset, what's that? We need to know that also. But I am for hand counting, and I am for getting rid of the machines. Thank you.
Thank you. Father?
Good afternoon. My name is Father Andy Hellman, Valley Fellowship Anglican Church here in Palmer, but we service all Mat-Su. I do have parishioners in every precinct and district that we have here, every center. That being said, majority of the individuals during coffee hours and discussion is first and foremost today, why are we having this meeting at 3 p.m. as opposed to 6 p.m.? That's a question that needs to be answered. I'm not going to take up my time for that. Next, all the people that are in my congregation wants to continue to have hand counting and do away with the machines. There's no trust in the machines. I don't care what you say, it doesn't get onto the internet or whatever. Each of us have had our own personal banking data, health data, and other personal data hacked. And if you haven't had that, God has blessed you. That being said, all the medical data for Australia has been hacked. All medical data for Australia has been hacked. That being said, please still continue to do the hand counting and do with the machines. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Sherry?
My name is Sherry Kaidan, and I'm a resident of Palmer, outside of Palmer, just off of Trunk Road in Palmer, Fisher. And I was an official last year in charge of a precinct, and I have some questions concerning the procedure that's written, and I totally support the hand counting and elections, actually all the elections being hand counted if possible. And I realize at this point it's just our borough elections, and I like to keep it as such. But in the procedure, and hopefully you'll address this when it comes to that point, it looks like we hand the ballots over actually before justifying between with the register and the number of ballots, so that we hand it off to the precinct official. And then the other question I have concerning this is if there will be observers permitted to observe all the hand count teams. So I guess I have more questions than comments, but I definitely believe that our elections have been suppressed as far as people are discouraged and do not trust them. So anything which is constitutionally permitted that would encourage people to be able to participate in our republic would be great. So if you keep these things in mind, I'd really appreciate it. So thanks very much.
Terry?
Mayor, Assembly, I was asked to come and talk about the issues I went through when my husband passed away. He passed away in Texas, and the state of Texas sent the state of Alaska a certified death certificate. And in 2020, I received a mail-in ballot application. And I took it to the Office of Elections in Wasilla and asked them why I was being sent this. And they said they didn't send it, that it was sent by the Republican Party, and I need to go to the LIO office and take care of it. So I went to the LIO office, told them I needed my husband's name taken off the ballot rolls, that he'd passed away in May of 2018. And apparently nothing was done on either side. So and also, later that fall, I received a mail-in ballot in Scott's name. And I took it down to the Office of Elections and asked them why I was receiving a mail-in ballot. My husband had passed away, and that I'd asked his name to be taken off the voter rolls. And they told me once again it was not my job. So then we had the election, or I shredded that ballot and threw it in the garbage. We had the election, and Senator Schauer had put on his Facebook page if anybody thought they'd had any voter fraud. And I thought, it's kind of fraudulent when they're sending out ballots to dead people. So I contacted him. He asked me to go to the Office of Elections in Wasilla and take another certificate of death and have my husband's name removed. And they were closed because apparently they're not essential workers. And so the office was closed because of COVID. So I mailed a letter and a certified copy of his death certificate to the state, and I heard nothing back. Senator Showers asked me to call the Office of Elections in Anchorage, which I did several times. Either the phone wasn't answered, I was put on hold, and I never was able to speak to anyone. So then I mailed another certified copy and a letter saying, please remove his name from the rolls. So then we had another election come up, and I think it was just a borough election. And I looked on the roll, and but my husband's name was still on the rolls. And it ticked me off, and I made a couple comments, and bless this poll worker's heart, after I was done voting, she came and asked me what the issue
Go ahead.
was, and I said, I can't get my husband's name off the voter rolls. So she took all of my information, all of Scott's information, and then when I went and voted for this election, his name was off the voter rolls, finally, after 4.5 years. We have voter fraud because we have dirty voter rolls. And I did my best as a citizen to get his name removed, and it took 4.5 years to get it done. Thank you.
Thanks, Terry. Tom? Tom?
Good morning or good afternoon. I'm Tom Olds, resident of Wasilla. And my question is this. We have several entities in the state of Alaska that invite people from outside, such as Mormon churches, other things. They come in, they register. And one church, for example, is on Strawberry in Anchorage that have all these missionaries come in, they gather in, they register them up, register them to vote, and then they're disseminated across the state. They are living other places, but they're registered as they lived at the church. How can we rectify this situation? Okay.
Okay, thanks. Rachel?
So I'm Rachel Allen, and I live in Mat-Su-Borough District 4. So I have a friend who 2 weeks before the election watches the Mat-Su-Borough public auction website. And he told me that there was a Dominion machine for sale 2 weeks before this last election. So I'm wondering how many times that has happened, and we just didn't even know that this was happening. And I know lots of people who are really techie can get into these machines and mess with them through Wi-Fi and all that stuff. And you say they're not connected to the internet, but a lot of these polling places are in schools that have to have internet for the schools. So when I went to vote, and I put my ballot in the machine said, well, you didn't vote the right way. Are you sure you want to cast this ballot? And I said, yes, because I voted the way I wanted to vote. So I want to know if a voter was concerned they didn't understand the rules of ranked choice voting, or they didn't vote according to how the machine thinks you should vote, and it thinks you made a mistake. How could I learn, or any other voter learn, whether or not their vote was counted or invalidated? So I don't even know if my vote was even counted, because the machine didn't like how I voted.
Madam Mayor, could I ask a clarifying question? Did you say a machine was on the borough website?
It was on the borough public auction website, and then my friend called the borough and let them know, and they
Okay.
were like, oh, oops, sorry, and they removed it.
Okay,
So it may have happened more than once, but we happened to catch it
okay.
2 weeks before this last
Thank you.
election.
John?
Thank you, everybody. I want to talk about why it's necessary to have cameras at our precincts. But first, I want to compliment our borough clerk and our state election head, I guess, Julie, I think they did a great job. I was a field worker for the state, and I traveled to about 6 different precincts. And besides a lot of the confusion from ranked choice voting and stuff, the elections were conducted really efficiently, and they did a really good job organizing everything. So I just wanted to thank you about that. I want to talk about why cameras are necessary. First of all, cameras deter any kind of misbehavior. That's why we have cameras in this room. Police wear body cams, cameras on their cars. It's a great deterrent from any kind of mischief. Also, cameras provide a good record of validating things and documenting things. So every ballot that goes through that's hand counted, there's a record of it. It can be traced. Also, problems that occur at a precinct when they're being counted, they can be, the problems can be eliminated really quickly because they can be viewed by the supervisors and they can be adjudicated right on the spot. Also, the clerk can't be at every precinct at all the time. But if there are cameras in the precinct watching the counting, they will be monitored at the central location, and she will have access to every camera in the precinct where she can watch the count going on. So there's a big advantage to having cameras there. Also, cameras protect the innocent people from false claims, false whatever, because here again, it's all documented. But probably one of the biggest reasons why cameras would be very, very helpful and necessary is because it would assure the voters themselves that our elections are transparent, honest, accurate, and fair. That the borough is doing everything they can to assure the public that they are doing everything they can to make sure everything is open and transparent for everybody to see. Now, the hand count went really well this time. I was able to sit in when they were hand counting, and it went very, very good. It was well organized and efficient, and actually finished before anybody expected.
Go ahead.
Shucks. Anyway, I was going to explain how cameras would work in the precinct, how simple it would be to install these cameras and monitor everything. I could probably do that at another time though, but it would be simple. So thank you.
Mhm. Mark?
Mark Spohn, live in Willow. I worked for the state, the primary and the general at Government Peak. So, and it's the first time this year is the first time I ever did that, but it's really an eye opener to see how this is working and what's going on. And I can't tell you how many people were just, you could tell they were extremely frustrated with the machine. They just comment and comment and comment, like, why do we got to do this? And the ranked choice, they just, I mean, it was constant all day long. And the problem, I mean, first of all, I want to thank the borough people that supported going to a hand count. I don't want to forget that, you know, that's appreciated. That's the only way that it can be done. But I'll tell you something that happens when these people feed that ballot in. The machine will give them a green check. That means it accepted their ballot. Or it's got a problem, it doesn't accept it, then they can have it returned to them and look at it, or they can push the button that says accept. And a lot of people, I mean, they're very, no, this is the way I voted, that's how I want it, and I don't want it changed. But I can't get anybody to answer me from any state agency, how did that machine count that ballot that it said was wrong? There's no number on it, there's nothing. It goes in there at the end of the day, you put them in envelopes and they get sent in. Nobody knows how that ballot, being the machine did not take it and give the green check, and then they had to say accept the way they did. Nobody can tell you. How did that machine count that ballot? And people say there isn't any question with these machines. There's a lot of questions. And there's people that are smart enough to know how to do things with computers and all that. But the hand count is the only honest way that I can see with a paper ballot. And people want a vote the way they voted. They don't want to do something with it. So, thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Richard? Stoffel? Yeah.
I'd like to ask a question because I'm not sure I'm understanding how the process is going. So they are hand counted. They're fed into a machine, but then they're later hand counted by the officials that are there. So I'm not sure that I understand why you wouldn't know how the ballots were counted. What?
Well, because the machine didn't give the green check mark, and then the person had to say accept or get it back and redo whatever the machine didn't like.
But once it goes in there though, then it's going to be hand counted. So it's like, who cares what the machine says?
This was a state ballot, it wasn't the borough.
Oh, I
I'm just
can't
trying to
speak to
show
that.
you what happens with the machine doing it.
Yeah, okay.
Everybody knows what that machine.
Well, I'm glad we have hand counts here. Yeah.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
We had
So I'm
Richard.
Richard Stoffel from Palmer, and I believe that we can't have a republic survive without election integrity. And I cannot believe that I have accepted the fact that my vote goes into a computer. They call them machines. They're really computers. Every one of them are computers. And so every computer can be controlled, hacked, and everything else. Anytime, all the time. And my phone, anything, you know. So I can't understand, you know, why we ever even brought them in, except to control the vote. That's the only logical reason that I can see that these computers are brought in. They're not more efficient, and you're going to get more proof of that probably tonight, that hand count is very efficient and more and less expensive and all that. It just baffles me that I was so asleep, 50 years ago whenever they brought these computers in, that I ever accepted it, put my vote in a computer. So I just I pray that I never have to put my vote into a computer again. You know, God help us.
Karen?
Good afternoon. My name is Karen Lewis. Thank you, Madam Mayor and Assembly people, for hearing us. I thought this was settled, but apparently not, or something. Maybe you just want more input. I found a pretty good article by Dr. Walter Dougherty, and he's a senior lecturer emeritus in the Department of Computer Science and Engineering at Texas A&M University. This Harvard graduate was called in to verify the conclusions of an independent panel of experts who examined hard drive data from 2 elections in November 2020 and April 2021. After vote counting was underway, thousands of ballots that had already been counted were secretly reprocessed inside the voting machine, undetected by election officials. Internal Wi-Fi Bluetooth wireless adapters in 35 machines allowed unauthorized external connectivity, opening the door for almost any computer in the world to connect to the software and server. Shadow databases, secretly created after counting began, were used to hold already counted ballots that were recounted with notice to election officials, and only the reprocessed ballot files were made visible to the officials while the original files remained hidden. The Dominion machine was present to erase critical records, the activity logs and user logins, within just a few days, effectively covering the tracks of anyone committing unauthorized access. Lovely. The bottom line is that voting machines are not trustworthy, Dougherty tells AFN. If you can't trust the machine to produce an accurate result, then we shouldn't be using them. He adds, we've gone from a process that's nearly 100% transparent with hand-marked hand-counted paper ballots to a process that's nearly 100% not transparent. Dougherty explains that ballots go into the machines and numbers come out, but it isn't clear what happens to those ballots in the meantime. Was it counted? Was it ignored? Was it altered or flipped or deleted? You don't know, he laments. Now that we've looked inside the machine after that election, we know what happened is not one, but two elections in Colorado, and both of them were manipulated. So my bottom line is you can't trust voting machines, so let's stop using them. There's a county in Arkansas that just decided to stop their machines too. They're going to try to get it done in the whole state. And Missouri too, I believe. I mean, people are waking up. We're not going to take it anymore. We want honest elections. Thank you.
Terry Olson. Terry Olson.
Terry Olson here, resident of the borough up Fishhook. You know, I've talked to lots of people on this ranked choice voting, and in my own family and neighbors and people that I've known for years. And a lot of the older folks didn't want to go vote because they didn't know how it was going to come out. They didn't understand it. Even younger people that I talked to thought that they could get by with putting the same rank across all the names on the ballot. And it just was crazy, some of the stuff that you had to try and explain to people. And it was very frustrating. And it seems to me that we're creating more time for people to have to vote and make the decision they already had in their mind to begin with, and go through the processes when it should be, you know, vote for your choice and be done with it. It just, what we had worked. Let's keep it that way and keep it simple and keep it feeling trustworthy, at least that we're doing our best to do an honest vote. And that's how I feel about it, as well as possibly the serial numbers on the ballots too would be handy to be able to verify that there's not more votes for somebody than there should be. But thank you for your time.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Jackie?
My name is Jackie Ivy Goforth. I am a resident of District 2. I'm an author and a researcher and a retired postal executive. In the late 90s, I was ranked the #1 route examiners for the Colorado and Wyoming district. That's the reason I came to Alaska. The Alaska district put out a call for the best examiners they could find. They chose 10. I came with a team of 10. They only asked one of them to stay. I fell in love with Alaska, so it worked out. I did a review of the polls from the election we had here, and I'm giving you my write-up because I wrote a write-up of it, and I have nothing but glowing reports to say about everything involved with the election and Lonnie McKechnie's staff. I've never seen such honest, integrity-filled people. And the machines worked exactly as they were supposed to. They're supposed to tabulate, and they did. Nothing was messed with. However, at the same time down in Texas, there were some people who were just as honest and had just as much integrity, and they were watching the amount of voters standing in line add up in their machines when the polls were closed. They work on a poll book, which is an internet iPad, and people were registering to vote, and the numbers were going on their machines from 300 to 400 to 600, 1,297 after the polls were closed. These are not ballots that exist, but they're vote ballots that can be thrown in later. And instead of calling 911 or reporting a crime in progress, all they did was video it, okay? Well, I also want you to know that right now in Coffee County, Georgia, they've called in the FBI because they want them to check over their election. And the ways that the election can be cheated and the fraud that can be going on has gotten so incredibly intricate. It's so interesting. I don't know if you've been following the Arizona election, but what they did now with Arizona, they did the Sharpie one 3 years ago. You used Sharpies, it bled through, and the machine couldn't read it. Well, this time they use electronic voting. You go in and you push your selections on a computer screen, and then it prints out your ballot. You verify what you did, and then you go and put it in the machine, right? Well, it worked fine until the day of election, and then they let 68% of the poll centers where all the Republicans vote run out of ink in a lot of these machines, so the ballots were not readable, and they all had to stand in line and revote. These were 4-hour lines, by the way. But the most creative one was they changed the size of the ballot printing. The ballot is supposed to be 20 inches. That's what the machine reads. But they have discovered that there are ballots in there that are 19 inches. Somebody from somewhere in that machine recalibrated the image to print at 19 inches, and the Dominion machine could not read it. That doesn't say that everybody isn't honest and integrity filled in the poll places. It says the machine was recalibrated to print out ballots, that the computer was recalibrated to print out ballots that the Dominion machines could not read. The selections were not in the correct place. That is why her lawsuit is being appealed, and she's going to the Supreme Court. The machines are not trustworthy, and I have now got the list of the amount of money it will cost for a hand count at the borough. One of them right away, the bottom one, we will also need to purchase portable tables for hand counting. The tables are already there. They use them when they work on the polls. I know, I was there, I saw it. You save $60,000 plus in my review, and I want somebody to take that one apart first. Thank you. And I have copies for anyone here who wants to see it.
Desiree Terry.
My question, oh, I'm Desiree Terry. I live in Equestrian. My question is, I have a friend that came and stayed with us, and she lived with us for probably 8 months. She registered here. She was planning on staying in Alaska and going to find a place to live and run a bed and breakfast. She ended up moving out of state. That was 2 years ago, and I still get her election materials to this day. And my question is, how do we know that these voter rolls are being cleansed of people that move out of state? She moved, and I know I don't get any of her other mail. And so I don't, that's my question. My other question is, last year we came here to the assembly and we all agreed that we would not use the machines or that we would have a hand count. This past election, we said we would have a hand count and use the machines. And then we decided as Mat-Su Borough that we would not use the machines any longer. I want to know what happened to that decision. Why are we here today? Deciding again. That's it.
Okay, Brian?
Brian Endel, thank you for hearing me tonight, Assembly and staff. Somebody left their phone here. So I wanted to, or did you mention that was used for something? Okay. So Jackie had mentioned something about the issues with the printing of the ballots, and those could be picked up with a hand count as well. Our group, the group that I've been working with and sending stuff to you guys on, we're concerned with two issues right now: the cameras, which could easily be implemented, and as well as the serial numbers. I did send a draft ordinance, which we all in our group looked at, and it was pretty straightforward. It's for adding cameras to the borough code. Nothing out of the ordinary there. Like I said, straightforward. It should be sent to your emails. The clerk should have delivered it to you. I want to talk specifically about 2520-045B, which talks about the ballots being numbered in series. Now, the email was sent to the clerk earlier. I asked, why are not the ballots numbered on the ballots themselves and not on the ballot tab? The ballot tab and the ballot are two different things. They're not the same. The ballot gets separated from the tab and the ballot gets delivered to the person or the voter. So the code specifically states that this 2520.045B, the ballot shall be numbered in series. To ensure simplicity and to prevent voter fraud. Now, the clerk's response to me is, when I ask, why aren't the ballots numbered themselves and not just the tabs? She says the code does state shall be numbered in series, but the most important part of that sentence is to ensure simplicity and secrecy. Putting serial numbers on the ballot instead of just a stub would no longer ensure secrecy to a voter or for a voter. Once a serial number follows the actual ballot, secrecy of that person's vote can no longer be guaranteed. So this is easily solved. You take the ballots, you put them in a container, whatever container that is, you flip them upside down, mix them up or whatever, and as they're flipped upside down with the serial number on it, or you print the serial number on the back, you slip that into the sleeve, which the person already gets. No one sees that serial number except for the person that votes and the person that counts it. That serial number there's two reasons for the, there's the main reason for the serial number and for the cameras is to prevent fraud. Now we know, or we suspect that there's no fraud taking place here in the borough, but we don't want that to happen either. And so easy ways to prevent that are to add a serial number. And so you can't stuff the ballots. People have been caught stuffing ballots in the lower 48. Cameras caught it. Serial numbers are a way to track that, because each of these serial numbers are tracked in every location. The serial numbers are reported, et cetera. So yeah, I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you. Dan McQuinn?
Hi, I'm Don McQuown, and I'm a Matsu Valley resident and have been for quite a while. We live in an age where we almost live in a surveillance state. And so my question is, what can we do to stop the Division of Elections from disclosing our personal identifiable information to ERIC, which is an unsecure, non-government organization? And I think we all have a right to privacy. We're talking about serial numbers here. There's a lot more than serial numbers and stuff like that by letting these NGOs have all our personal our information. Thank you.
Thank you. John Nelson?
Mayor, Assembly, my name is John Nelson. I'm a financial advisor by trade. I am a resident of the Valley. And I remember coming up here last year, testifying several times and asking if anybody had read the Chewbacca report. I will ask a third time, has anybody taken the time to read the Chewbacca report? We have one person that has raised their hand. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. But did you get past the redacted portion of that? Because 60+% of it was redacted out. How can you have transparency in election if it's redacted out? Zero transparency on redaction. To err is human. To really mess things up requires a computer. They can flip a switch and it will count it and tabulate it just fine until they flip another switch that says they can manipulate it any way they want. Prove me wrong. Prove me wrong. Eric is messed up. The Division of Elections is messed up because the database that we received in April of 2021 from the 2020 general election showed 13,000 people in the Matsu borough as not voting, including me. And nobody challenges that, except for me calling up the Division of Elections and them admitting to me, saying their database is flawed. Now, that's their words to me. If I do a financial plan for a client and one piece of information is out of place, the whole report is null and void. You cannot do planning like that. If we are to secure our elections, then make any changes, put the vote up to the people to let them choose if we want machines or hand count. It should not be left up to a committee of a small number of people to change it on a whim. Thank you.
Sherry Wilson?
Mayor, Assembly, my name is Sherry Wilson. I'm a resident of the borough. And as I look forward to us getting rid of the Dominion machines or other machines that can be tampered with or that run algorithms, and we go to hand count, I hope we all understand that humans are fallible. So there's going to be an error count, and we want to be able to limit that error count as much as possible. So the way to do that, our largest publishing houses in the US have already let it be known to us that with 7 proofreaders on text documents, there will be a guaranteed 3% error. So if we only have 1 person or 2 people counting a ballot, you can imagine the error will be greater. So I would hope that we understand that we want at least just a minimum of 3 independent ways of counting our ballots. So that can be, first of all, with the registrar, that's taking people's ID. You have a running count at the voting poll. Then you can have the person that's counting the ballot afterwards. And a third way can just be a basic counting machine that isn't connected to anything. All it does is count 1, 2, 3. And I hope at a minimum we'll at least do that so we can get as close to an error-free election as an election count as possible. Thank you.
Cassandra Graham?
Hello. My name is Cassandra Graham, and I have worked with the elections for the last 15 years. I've worked for state elections. I've worked polling places. I've worked polling places for the Mat-Su Borough. In the last several elections, I have worked the canvassing board for the Mat-Su Borough. The job of the canvassing board is to go through all the ballots. We go through the question ballots. We go through the ballots at the polling place. We go through mail-in ballots. We do what is considered a ballot accountability. Every ballot that's sent out and every ballot that comes back, either voted or mailed in, must match. This is to ensure there are not things like ballot stuffing and extra ballots going out that shouldn't be going out. One of the tools we have always used is the counting machine. We have to review every single polling place. The machine not only counts the vote, it counts how many ballots are in that box. We cannot use the registers anymore because the registers are unreliable. A lot of people show up for the state election, sign the borough register, but refuse a borough ballot. So we go to the tape to tell us how many ballots are in the box. Excuse me, I'm a little nervous. So if there's 700 ballots in the box and 700 ballots were issued, we're good. If you take away the tape, what we'll have to do, or what will have to happen, is not only hand counting the vote, you're going to have people hand count how many ballots are in the box. Once that's done at the polling place, the canvassing board will likely have to recount how many ballots were in that box. It's not for one polling place, it will have to be probably for all of them. If we don't have that tape to rely on, if the canvassing board is counting every ballot to make sure the ballot accountability matches, that's going to delay the hand count of the vote when they're voting upstairs. If you're going to require poll workers to hand count the ballots at the end of an incredibly long day, are we going to wait until the polling place is cleared out to make sure it's secure? You're going to make sure all the state workers are gone and all the voters are gone. And then the backup, again, is going to be more complicated. The canvassing board will need to recount that. If their numbers are off, we'll have to recount that to make sure every ballot is accounted for before it can go to be hand counted for a vote. I'm not against hand counting. I think that it's a great backup. We obviously have a trust issue. We have to find ways to make sure people trust the election. But simply getting away or throwing away a tool that we can use and overcomplicating and overhandling all the ballots can't be the only answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Lloyd? Lloyd?
Name's Lloyd Thurman, Big Lake area. Thank you, Madam Mayor, and the rest of you guys up there on the assembly. Appreciate it very much. As the others had said before, I thought we'd already resolved this issue. Why are we bringing it back up again? That's just kind of a question. I guess I'll just kind of round up with several other comments that other people have made here in the process. We're not questioning any of the process with the clerk nor the integrity of any of the people that are here. We're not questioning that at all, not even close. But we want to make sure that no fraud could take place in the future. We're only one borough out of the state, and therefore what we're hoping to be able to do is be able to transport this to the rest of the boroughs so we can get rid of these dang machines out of here that are corruptible. You have listened to it over and over and over by experts out of state, in state, and everywhere else of the corruptibility of these things. The whole Dominion process of the whole software that they created was for the purpose of keeping Chavez in Venezuela and so that they would have a fraudulent election. So, and if they can control that, which we know that they can, and then why in the world do we want to have that here? They have transported it all across the country. And if you haven't seen Fraction Magic, then you need to watch Fraction Magic on YouTube. It shows you how easily it is. And by whatever percentage, it's going to be a blowaway. It's going to really be a tight race. Whenever you design it in with 1.125, it's going to be a close race, So the point is, we're talking about the possibilities of the cost that is involved. We've already proven, even through this portion here, what is it, $85,000 for the process that we have using the Dominion, $608,000 for an 8-year contract, $608,000. We have the people that are already there in counting the stuff in the precincts, which I was up there on the hill at Government Hill up there. People were frustrated. The lines are incredibly long. The portion is, we don't need the machines. The people are there. If they want to leave and they can't make it, hey, then we can hire extra people. It's putting the money back in our own people. Why do we want to be giving this to outside interests that are there? Why do we want to be paying enormous amounts of money for that? We don't want to do that. This is ridiculous. We don't want to do that.
Thank you.
They counted it at the precinct. They counted it at the district. Those are 2 counts right there. So you're automatically checking it right there. And if you wanted to get crazy with even a 3rd count, hey, we're paying for this and we want honest elections. I don't spend tremendous amounts of money. We want honest elections and we don't care about the cost. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Chris?
I'm Chris Tyree, but somebody already spoke about what I was going to speak about, which is absentee ballots at somebody's home. But at my home, I got about 6 to 8 ballots. As an adult parent, I know I don't go register my child to vote. So why are they registering my children to vote? I got a bunch of voting from them doing that to my grandchildren and my children. And none of them want to vote. What do you do with those? Do you take them to somebody and say, hey, here, vote for this person for me? And this is who to vote for. I could do that. I could ask somebody to vote for so-and-so and give them the card. These adults should know better. This is all about control when it comes to a lot of this stuff. And for them to register people that don't want to register, that's wrong. And that's another thing that got snuck in with our voting stuff, just like rank voting got snuck in. When I voted for dark monies, I was not voting for rank voting, and that's what was in it. And that was wrong. That is colluding against the people. So this is all wrong, that what's going on. I'm the same way. I thought we weren't going to have machines anymore in the borough. We don't need machines. We have enough people to count, just like everybody else is saying. We do need transparency and integrity, honesty, which is not happening in our government. This is why everybody's here, because it's not happening. We're not the ones in control, and we need to be the ones in control. And you guys are supposed to be our representatives. And I know that you guys vote non-constitutional, some of you, a lot. So that means you're not voting for the people and you're not representing them. But anyways, please don't register adults to vote unless they want to register. Let them register themselves. Thank you.
Mhm. Mary?
Hi, I'm Mary Rivetta. I retired as a Boeing engineer, electrical for antenna systems, and I retired as a substitute teacher from LA Unified School District, Los Angeles. I moved here a year ago and I registered to vote, and I did get a mail-in voting sent to my house that I didn't request. But my biggest complaint is the ranked choice voting. What can we do to correct that decision that the government made for us? I don't remember voting on that, or maybe it was done before I moved here. But what I really didn't like is when two maybe Republican candidates would run and they would split the vote, and then the Democrat would just have to beat, their vote that they split. So I thought that was not very good. And and one couldn't step down, that didn't seem to work. As well as I just felt like there seemed to be cheating going on from just my vantage point, just my own personal vantage point. So that's all I have. Thanks.
Could I just, Madam Mayor, may I ask a clarifying question? The mail-in ballot that came to your house, was it an actual ballot for you to vote, or was it a form where you could request a mail-in ballot?
I just saw it yesterday and I threw it away, but it looked like a ballot to vote, and it sounded like it said to vote.
So it had candidates listed that you would vote for?
I thought it did.
Okay. And was that a state or a borough ballot?
It could be state. I am kind of learning that you have two different voting. And in fact, it was kind of interesting. You guys, I've heard you didn't use the machines, but yet when I did go to vote, it seemed like one of my ballots went into one machine and one went into another machine. So one was for the borough. So that sounds like you used a machine, but I heard you didn't. So that was a little confusing.
For this election, we machined and then we hand counted them all.
So
for the
it's
next
like-
election, it's set up to just hand count.
Like both then, okay. So that might be the confusion. Yeah, I don't know if I can find that ballot, but the concern would be that it was sent to me to be able to vote by mail that I didn't request, right? Yeah, it was most likely a request, or an actual ballot. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Mary. Dominic? Dominic? Or, I'm not, it's not Dominic. Dimitri. Dimitri. Okay, all right, thank you. Jim, how do you say that? Oh, there he is. Here he comes. Yeah.
Mayor, Borough Assembly people. My name is Jim Kager. I've been in Alaska for near 50 years now. And our elections have seemed to be, the water seems to get muddier and muddier every year. Just a few things that you may or may not know. I suppose you guys know that you don't hold the source codes for the Dominion machines. And do you know where Uzbekistan is? That's where the software is written, in Uzbekistan. Where the elections are being set up, all that software comes out of Canada. None of this stuff is being happening in the United States. I think there's something wrong with that. Thank you.
Is there anyone in the audience that didn't sign in but would like? Yeah, come, Mike.
I'm Mike Alexander, Big Lake, and thank you for Chamsoft talking here. The thing about it is, this is $148,000 is the expense I saw for hand counting on this election. Compared to paying my money to the school system, the way it works, I'll take this every day for an honest election. I'll even chip in, sell raffle tickets for you if you need it for the money. But you know, it's an honest thing. You know, you're getting an honest vote. As far as having the machines count the tablets, I think it would be an honest thing to say, gee, here's a box of ballots. Let's find out how many are in here. We'll count them, then we'll see if they add up to that number. So, and I think you can get this done. And people, once you get used to doing it this way, that's a lot of it. When you have a system, like the lady that was working there, yeah, you're used to that system, so it's a little hard to change, but you can do that. And we have honest elections. Us and 130 other precincts across the state that also hand count. So it's not anything new, but it does set an example. And I think for a larger population area, it sets the example for the state that maybe perhaps they could come on board and start doing hand count and get rid of their machines. It's about time to do that because at least it's honest. If it takes us 3 days to know, big deal. We're still waiting for 2 weeks after the election before we know who won the elections on the state portal. So why bother? If it takes us 3 days, it takes us 3 days. I don't think it will. And we can always get more people to come in. And I think it's money well spent because then there is not, if you lose, you lose. You can't whine and go, gee, the machines were fixed. You just lose. We have honest elections, whether the outcome is your favorable thing or not. You have an honest election, and that is worth all the money in the world. Thank you.
Cindy?
Good afternoon, Mayor, Assembly members. Thank you for giving us residents a chance to talk. My question here is, well, like other people had mentioned, that I thought this was already resolved. I was surprised to find out that it wasn't. But here, I guess the reason could be if the machine count and the hand count were the same and there was no issues with it, then you go, why should we hand count? However, does a cheater cheat when they know they're being watched? So that's all I have to say. If you know you're being watched.
Cindy, state your name for the record.
Sorry. My name is Cindy Hudgens and I live in Palmer. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, yes.
I have
Go
another
ahead,
question, if I can go
Assemblyperson
before you,
McKee.
That's all right. I'm feeling like the twilight zone here, and the last lady that spoke said she thought it had been resolved, and it had. We voted for hand verified, the combination of the machines in the November, whatever the first election, and then the second one was all hand count. So that's what we said we were going to do. So I don't know where the concerns are coming from.
Can I help clarify that a little
please
bit?
do,
I think
yes.
this is one of the issues that was
brought up. We did two different things. We used for the state, we used the machines, strictly the
'cause-
machines
And we
for the
can't
state.
control that
For the borough, we did the machines and the hand count,
for the first
right?
election.
Right?
Well, we did that for the first election, and we said everything after that, because Carl Bernier,
We
Ron-
did two
not
different
Carl,
things there.
Ron.
And I
And
think
he-
that might be some of the confusion out here that we're hearing. So
Is
if
that
you
what
want
it
to
is?
clarify it, that what we did was for the state election, we used strictly machines, no hand counts. Only the requirement of 5% for the district, I think it is. And then for the borough, we used the machines, but then we hand counted every ballot.
Mhm.
Am I correct on that?
Yep.
You're right.
Okay.
Yeah, Assemblyperson McKee, I think where this meeting was scheduled, and the clerk can help me, was after the assembly had made that last decision. There was at least one assembly person that said they had some questions and they wanted to have a meeting scheduled to
Oh.
discuss the questions.
Okay,
So that, Madam Clerk, and the clerk is saying yes. So that's why this meeting was scheduled.
But
And
just
as
to
you-
reassure myself and the other folks, we hand count. That's what we do in the
Correct.
borough. and
We
that's
hand
it.
counted the precincts.
Yeah.
This meeting today was scheduled the day the assembly made that decision.
Oh, okay, so that
So you
might-
guys could find out how the hand count went
Yeah.
and how we're going to proceed and any other questions.
Okay, I just want to make sure we had
This
that
has
locked in
nothing to do with
because.
tabulators. It has to
Yeah,
do
okay.
with hand counting.
Thank you kindly.
Okay, now go ahead and state your name, sir.
Hi, I'm Dave Johnson. I live here in the borough. Nice meeting y'all. Good to come down and have the opportunity to talk to you. Hi, Julie. How you doing? I got a few questions, I guess, and one of the things that we talked about was the voter rolls. Okay, I heard a lady talk about her husband being dead, not be able to get him off the voter rolls. I've heard people say that they had people live in their houses. They don't live there anymore. They can't get them off the voter rolls. It becomes your problem, not the state's problem. And my concern with that is we have all these automated methods that we add people to the voter roll, but nothing automated to take them off. In the statutes, it states that once a month, as a minimum, the director shall remove dead people from the voter rolls. It's there, black and white. Is it happening? I don't know. The other problem with the state like ours is we have a high turnover of military here. So these people leave, but if you look at other methods to check to see who lives in that residency, you'll find that the house has been sold maybe 3-4 times, but the person that owned the house 10 years ago doesn't own the house now. So somebody else bought it. They don't own the house. Another person bought it. So you got the last 2 people on the voter rolls and 8 people registered to that house. There's a problem with the voter rolls. They need to be cleaned up. Need to be cleaned up very badly. Absentee ballots. I have a little issue with the absentee ballots. We talked about serial numbers being on the ballots and stuff like that as a way to control them. The only thing I saw as a real issue that really caused concern during this election was that the absentee in-person ballots are not accounted for. And I mean that, by the way, is if you put in for a mail absentee ballot, there's a request. So let's say there's 500,000 requested ballots. I'm just making numbers up here. All right, 500,000 ballots were sent out. We got 490,000 returned. If you look at the in-person absentees, it's always 0, 0, 0, except for what happened when you got them back. Well, an in-person absentee closes on, this was on the 8th from November. So the evening of the 7th of November is the last time you can vote in-person absentee early ballot, I guess it's called. Election day. So you have these ballots, and they're usually done in a government building, library, city hall, something like that, by a clerk, okay, somebody that works for the state or the borough or whatever area. Then that person has control of those ballots and they're mailed back. Well, that was a problem. I don't see it being accounted for. I don't know how many ballots were given out by that person or that unit, that organization at that spot. So that caused me some concern. I think it could be managed better. And yeah, ranked choice voting, we need to get rid of that. And we don't need to use ERIC anymore. Every state that has duplicate voters
is registered to Eric. We have quite a bit of problems on our voter rolls. I think getting rid of Eric is one of the good things we could do. And get rid of ranked choice voting. I have a lot more, but don't have time.
Thank you.
Mayor DeVries, Assemblyman, women. First of all, I appreciate that you are not re-looking at changing and going back to the Dominion voting machines. That's what I'm understanding. So I thank you for that. I do have a couple of other issues that I've noticed during the election. First of all, I was a precinct person, and I did do a lot of canvassing in my precinct. And I agree with a gentleman that was right before me. I was amazed at how many people were registered to vote that did not live at the residences that I visited. And I can't tell you about how many people were upset when I asked them, do you know these 5 other people that are registered at your home? They were livid. How can I get these people off of this? A lot of these people lived there for 20 years and knew nothing about these other people. Point 1. Second point was I also did sign up to be a poll watcher. And I thought it really interesting that I had to make multiple phone calls and send multiple emails to actually get to be a poll watcher. I did get signed up for the borough, which I was glad because I did want to participate. When I got there, I got to talking to a lot of the state people and realized that a lot of the state workers were actually state employees. And they told me that the reason that they were working was because there were not enough people to sign up as poll watchers or poll workers for the state. Well, here I am going, wait a minute, I'm trying to get there. Nobody calls. I find that to be a problem. The other problem that I think we need to really look at is one of the regulations. And this may not be a big deal, but I did bring this up in my training. I realized in my training that if you know an election worker, they do not have to provide identification. Well, first of all, I find that very disturbing because first of all, either A, you're setting a precedent where if you know somebody, you get special treatment, or if it's just the opposite, now we are taking people who don't know somebody and we are discriminating against them and making them provide identification. So I would really like us to look at that rule to see why are we not doing the same thing for each and every voter in our state. Thank you.
Can I have you state your name for the record, please?
Yes, ma'am. So my name is Donna Kager.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that didn't? Yeah, come forward. And if there's others too, if you want to go ahead and form a line like they did earlier, and then we'll go to online. We have some online people. No. Okay.
Hello,
ahead,
I'm Karen Crandall from Big Lake. I didn't really come prepared, but just listening, to all the comments, it's really sad, the fact that there is so much illegal voting going on in our nation. I mean, it's just a huge change that has caused people to just become downcast and disheartened. So with the Dominion misuse of these machines, seeing other nations involved, we already went over that before. We see, that is illegal right there. Just the fact that other nations are involved. The next thing that's illegal is just dead people being tallied. That's just a blatant fact that this is happening. And not even being able to get names of husbands or wives or family members taken off of the polls. That's ridiculous. But I did have an opportunity to have my husband's name removed from the poll. But I have no idea if his name is going to show up during the next election. But I did see some accommodation there at the polls. And then we also have the illegal absentee ballots that are being requested, that were not requested, being sent out. To me, that's illegal. It shouldn't even be happening unless a person requests them. And I know there was some debate on whether it was really just a questionnaire to get an absentee ballot. I have no idea. But then the next thing that I feel is really good is that you have done a great job, it sounds like, with having the handheld elections being upheld for the first time. And we need to do that across our state and really understand that, from what I understand, in France, they had handheld elections also, handheld ballot, and it went very well. And there are some places in the United States that did that, and then everything was very accurate and not illegal. And we need to keep in mind the mass confusion that goes on with the ranked choice voting. People have just flat out lost trust in government, period. And that to me is very heartbreaking. And we're seeing people that have been upstanding citizens of our state, such as my neighbor who was so furious, and I never see him mad, that every single person that he voted for didn't even make it because of the mass confusion with the ranked choice voting. So to me, a lot of people in their hearts want to give up on the whole process of voting. And I hope that we can make things better and really pull forth our position of leadership to be upright and to bring forth the freedoms that we all hold dear. Thank you.
Anyone else that hasn't testified that would like to? Okay.
Can we
And
do it? Can we speak a second time?
thanks, Larry. I have to be the hard taskmaster, sorry. Caitlin? No, okay. Well, one person that didn't testify is having a birthday today, so I just want to say happy birthday, CJ. I was waiting for her to testify, but she didn't, so anyway. So with that, I will close audience participation, and Madam Clerk, I'll turn the business portion of the meeting over to you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I did hand out a memo, and there was copies in the back of the, or outside the door too. It talked about this year when we did the hand count, it went very well. It was pretty darn efficient. We had never done it before, so I was very happy to see how efficient the process was that Sonia and I created. It did cost approximately going on almost $6,000. We could have done it a lot faster. However, at the time when we were doing this process, we had the Canvas board meeting at the same time. I really didn't know how much time I would have, and I didn't want a whole bunch of teams up here counting that I couldn't assist. But now that we've done it, I could have. I now see that. But it went really well. In 2023, there's a number of changes. It's not just hand counting at the precinct that we're going to do, and I'll go over that a little bit. What I see is the procedure for hand counting is we have an application that's out there already for election officials. You can choose to be, you can mark all the positions you want. The positions are election officials at the precincts, absentee officials, canvass board members, and also hand count officials. So we do need about 123 hand count officials for the precincts and then 8 for the early voting sites. So that's additional 131 people if some of the election officials, after they work their 16-hour day, don't want to actually count at the end of the night. We'll need additional people. But how I see it working, and the reason why we need tables, is every other year we're with the state of Alaska. We already have to deliver tables to precincts. There is not enough tables, and we can't require private entities to have more tables for us. It's a lot easier for them just to take a portable table with them, because at the end of the night when it's closing, when the precinct is closing, they are using all those tables, having all their forms laid out. So I don't want to get in a situation where the hand counting teams are now having to wait 2 hours to start counting the ballots when they don't have to. So that is going to be an additional cost that we'll put in the budget this year, is just to be able to hand carry a table with them. And then I expect them to arrive there between 7:30 and 7:45 p.m. at night before the polls close. They will not start hand counting until the last voter has left the building. They will not start hand counting until the election precinct officials have started their closing process. So how I visualize that happening is that once the election officials start their closing process, they are an election official that worked the polling place all day, 1 or 2 of them, along with a hand counting official, will take the ballots out of the box. They'll verify all the ballots are out of the box. Then they'll take them over to their hand counting area, start the hand count while the precinct officials are closing the polls. Because if we're waiting for the precinct officials to close the polls, you're talking an additional 2 to 3 hours before we even start getting numbers in. Because sometimes it takes a while to close a polling location. It's not just done, and we're all done. That does not occur. So at that point, once the election officials will have the register. One of the jobs of the precinct election officials to count how many people have signed that register. They're going to provide that number to the hand counting officials. So if 300 people sign that register, the hand counting officials should be counting 300 ballots. So there will be a verification that way. At that point, once they are done with their hand counting, and of course, Sonia and I will be available for questions they may have calling in. I will be doing a training for all these hand count officials where they'll actually be hand counting ballots so they can ask questions. Because sometimes if you have somebody that marks, say that you have three people on the ballot and they've marked 2 ovals, they need to know what to do with that. So they will receive training. But at the end, when they are done hand counting, we did this before we got the electronic way to transmit, or not transmit the results, but to report the results when the memory cards came back in. We always had this big spreadsheet, had all the precincts listed. So they will be calling in those numbers, and when they're calling them in, we will be loading them up to the webpage. And at that point, the election officials will have already closed, more than likely, I hope so, have finished their closing process by the time that the hand count is done. They'll have secured all of their items that they have. The hand count officials will secure the ballots that they have counted, and the hand count officials will be bringing the items back here to the borough. In reference to early voting, we had about 6,000 of those. So there's a lot more ballots to count than what you would have at the precinct. So I anticipate having 2 or 4 teams of 2 teams for DOE, 2 teams for MSB early voting locations. They can about 5 p.m. they can start sorting ballot styles, because this last election, how many ballot styles do we have? 11? 9. Thank you. We had 9 ballot styles. They can start sorting the ballot styles. They can't start counting. We can't start counting until 8 p.m. But at least at that point, they can have them sorted and start counting at 8 p.m. So that hand counting process will take a little bit longer. And then once they return everything, of course, the canvas board's going to be checking all this the next day, that what was called in was actually what was reported on the hand count officials form. If there's anything that's incorrect in reference to that, they will start looking at items. And I think we have a question over here, Madam.
I had 2 questions. If you could explain the closing process, what that entails, because that sounds like a really lengthy process and probably not everybody's familiar with that is. And when you talk about ballot styles, I know what you mean, but I'm not sure everybody would realize. What I think you're talking about is that different locations have different races on the ballot.
Correct.
So you might have one in the city that,
Correct.
okay. And I think both those are worth just
Okay.
explaining.
So in reference to ballot styles, each assembly district generally will have its own ballot style, because Assembly District 6, they're electing Assembly District 6 who do not qualify for Assembly District 2 ballot. Like this year, we had Assembly District 2 had 2 different ballot styles, because there was an area-wide question, which everybody that lived outside the city of Palmer could vote on, but or non-area wide question, but the city residents couldn't. So these are what creates ballot styles. In reference to closing, what they're doing in their closing procedures, we have a ballot accountability report. They have to go through and verify in the morning time before they start, they're verifying the serial numbered ballots that they have received. They're verifying that's what they have. Then they're having to account for every ballot they have used. And sometimes that takes a while. They're going through all their numbers. Their question, how many question ballots did you issue? How many registered officials are registered? How many people signed the register? And sometimes, because it's sometimes after 8 p.m. at night, they've been there all day, it takes a number of times to count that register to come up with the right number. So basically what they're doing is looking at, and they're counting for every ballot they have issued. Every ballot that's still non-issued. They're accounting for all of those. Is there anything that I did not say, Sonia?
Special needs.
Oh, and then they are accounting for the special needs ballots they've issued or the special need ballots they received. So there's a number of different things that they're looking at. We have a question down here.
Assemblyperson McKee, go ahead.
Oh,
You were talking about the fact that they could start sorting, not counting, but sorting ballots at 5 o'clock or something like that. What are they sorting by?
So the early voting officials, so early voting ends the Friday before the election, because we got to start printing the registers for the precincts. And our early voters, their names will show up on the precinct register that they already voted. So at DOE and MSB are two early voting locations. They have daily ballots that they secure, and then they come here to the borough. What they'd be doing is opening up those daily bags. Say that Assembly District 3 is a purple ballot and Assembly District 1 is a tan ballot. They'd be sorting the ballot style by color.
All right.
Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay. Assemblymember Hill.
Oh, Assemblyperson Hale.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So a question on this new process here. When we reach precinct officials will provide the hand counting team with the total number of people who have signed the register. As we've heard and as we've seen, not everybody who signs the register casts a ballot. They sign the borough register and they go, oh, I don't even know what I'm voting for in the borough here. I was just here for the state election, and they just toss it in the trash or whatever. Is there a place during this process where, while the precinct officials, not the counters, but while the precinct officials are closing down their stations, that they will actually count the number of ballots that are in the ballot box and provide that to the counters as well? So say 380 people sign the register, but there's only 363 ballots in the box. If you're given the counters the 380 number, and they get to the end of their count and they've got 156 and 147, and they're short numbers for the people that sign the register, how do they rectify that? How do they not think that they made a mistake and start counting again, for instance?
So generally, when people are taking those ballots out of the ballot box, they're not counting the individual ballots. They never have done that. We could, however, the way that I'm looking at it is we've got two teams of election officials there. If on the ballot accountability report, they say 200 people signed the register, but the hand counting teams only have 167, that's going to make a red light go off for the canvas board that we'll have to look at.
So then the canvas board would count the total number of ballots.
They would first probably start out with the number of people who signed the register.
And count those, and then count the actual number of ballots in the box. Would they again then recount the votes that were cast?
If they find a discrepancy, that's up to, at this point, it's up to the canvas board. There's nothing in code. More than likely they would.
So they would, that kind of type of problem would be bumped up the chain of command to the canvas board. And it wouldn't cause confusion to the counters who are expecting to find 200 ballots.
No, and if they are going to be reporting those issues to us too when they come back.
Okay. Perfect, thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Couple of questions, and then I'd like to clarify a couple things. So for some, it may seem confusing. It may seem like we spent it. Well, we did spend, or we would spend 148,000 approximately on our on the election. I'd like to note that 121,000 of that we would spend even if we didn't do the hand count. So we got to have the precinct officials, absentee officials, canvas board, and all that anyway. So the hand counting itself, this is just an estimate because we spent about 6,000 this year because we did it here. But if we want to do it at all the precincts, and we do, we voted on that for this year. I'm excited about it, but it should be approximately 27,000. I think that's a lot better than spending 76,000 for machines. So I wanted to note that in case anybody thought we were spending more. We're not. We're spending substantially less. So a couple of other things. and nobody up here likes this, but we don't control our voter rolls. I do think everybody in here should reach out to their representatives and their senators and tell them we think that's something the state should take up this year, but we don't have any control of that over here. I believe, and I could be wrong, it's a question for the clerk, but when somebody signs up for a PFD in Alaska, does that not automatically sign them up to register to vote?
It does.
So, and obviously there's people pass away, people move, blah, 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 blah. There's a million reasons why they need to be cleaned up. So my next question is, would it be legal? And I honestly don't know. That's why I'm asking. Could the Matsu Borough create, maintain, and scrub its own voter rolls? Can we create our own? Why not? I mean, I'm fine if it's no. I just want to know why.
Because 2926.050B says so.
Okay, fair enough.
Prohibited.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. Yeah,
It says that municipalities may not maintain their own voter registration.
yeah. And then the only other thing, and I love the idea of cameras. I think all elected officials should have to wear them too. But serial numbers, all that. My only concern, and I'm not a tech guy, I can barely fly my cell phone. So in the state constitution, Article 5, Section 5, Line 3 clearly states that secrecy of voting shall be preserved. I think everybody would agree that that's probably the most important thing we do in an election. Get the count right and then make sure everybody's doesn't know how each person voted. I don't even know how my wife votes. None of my, I mean, I kind of do, but you know what I mean? So I think it's important that, you know, we remain a very private place. And Alaska has the strongest privacy laws in the country. I don't know how many of you guys know that, but our constitution and our privacy laws in Alaska are stronger than any other state. So my question for the attorney and the clerk is, do you think that we could maintain that, the privacy and protection for individuals if we numbered them and had cameras and stuff? Because I'm not a tech person, and maybe that's something we can't answer tonight, but just if you could speak to it briefly.
In reference to serial numbers on the ballots. So the reason why they're serial numbered up in the upper right-hand corner on the ballot stub is so you can account for every ballot you've used. That serial number does not follow the ballot once it comes off, because then you can track how somebody voted. If you're putting, say that you had, we always over order ballots for precincts because I don't ever want them to run low. Say that one precinct had 2,000 ballots and we're putting them in, and they had serial numbers on them and we're putting them in, mixing them up. I can't imagine trying to do a ballot accountability report with mixed up serial numbers, because you're doing the math by the serial numbers, and those are sequential. And even voters' privacy should also be voters' privacy from the clerk's office who's mailing out ballots. I don't want to know somebody's serial number on their ballot. However, if they're printed on the ballot, I could know. And I could know how somebody voted when that ballot returned. And that, frankly, that's nobody's business. And it would make me very uncomfortable.
So you're saying with absentee, when people request?
Yeah, I'm talking about by mail when we send out ballots, or even at the polling locations. Once you tear off that ballot, that election official can see that serial number.
Why would they have to see the serial number? Because I was thinking, if it's not, if there's, like, if you had a registration, you know, how you sign it all up, if you gave them a ballot and they wrote in their registration number, obviously, I mean, their serial number, that'd be a problem. But if you don't know, how would you know, how would you put those numbers and the people together when there's no way to match them up?
There is, Assemblymember Yunt asked me about what I thought about people or serial numbers being printed directly on the individual ballot. Rather than on the stub.
Not both.
Well, it would have to be both,
Yeah.
more than likely.
Yeah.
But if it's on the actual ballot, if somebody wanted to, they could track how somebody voted.
How could you do that? I'm just curious because I don't.
Because I could tear off the ballot and know that this person got ballot number 1, 2, 3, 4, because it's the next sequential number.
But they're not voting in order that they signed in to vote necessarily. I mean, they may go out and have a cup of coffee and then come
They're
back.
signing the register.
Yeah, that's the
If I
registration.
want to know how my dad voted,
Uh-huh.
all I need to do is know that he got ballot 1, 2, 3, 4.
How would you know that that's what your dad got from, you couldn't get it from the, I'm just curious because I really don't know how this works. So your dad isn't going to be assigned a serial number, just a ballot and a stub. So dad comes in and 4 hours later he votes and
I don't know how you're asking, because if the serial number is printed on the ballot,
yeah.
I am tearing that ballot off the stub to hand it to him.
Yeah.
So how can I not know what that number is?
Well, then that would mean sort of you have to take a picture of it or write the number down and pair it with that person and that otherwise I don't know how you get the connection. Am I missing something here?
Just the opportunity for someone.
Yeah, there is an
to-
opportunity.
Oh.
There's an opportunity for someone to look at the person that they're tearing that ballot out for and remark on that number. And then later, write it down and go back and look and see how that person voted. And so that gives an opportunity for the secrecy of your ballot to be.
Okay, and I get that. So what if you turned it over and you didn't ever even see the serial number or the thing that you tore off? You just simply, it was upside down. You don't see it. You tear it off, you give it to them, boom, they're gone. You don't know what it is. Couldn't you do that?
Absolutely.
Could that?
I'm still trying to figure out what would be the need for the serial number on the ballot when we're already tracking the serial numbers and what is being used.
Because if you were tracking to see if you had serial numbers 862 through 943 and you've got all of those, then that's just another way to make sure that you've got all of the ballots. But I'm saying, because that would, nobody could slip in, that would prevent ballot stuffing and that sort of thing. I'm just saying, if nobody sees it.
Our process would already prohibit ballot stuffing. We already know what ballots each precinct got.
Yeah.
And at the end of the night, at the end of the day, if the canvas board shows that they have 10 more ballots in their ballot box than ballots they issued, there would be a problem.
What would be the downside of turning it upside down so nobody sees it? What would be the downside of having?
I don't know what you mean turning it upside down.
Okay, so if this is the front of the ballot and the serial number's printed right here and then the little stub apparently up here as well.
Mhm.
If the person checking in that voter never sees that, it's upside down, they don't see it.
How are they tearing it off the pad if it's upside down?
How are they what?
How are they tearing it off the pad if it's upside down?
Well, because it'd be perforated and you just tear it off.
No, you actually have to do this and then start tearing the ballot. It's not like you can be upside down and you're tearing it from the bottom of the pad or from the back of the pad.
I don't know. It's what? I don't know. I see what you're saying, but I also think that if.
Me personally, and I'm just going to say this,
Yeah.
if we start putting serial numbers on ballots, I will not be voting anymore.
Because you think somebody would know
Because
how
I
you
don't
voted.
think it's anybody's business what ballot serial number I voted or anybody could track how I
So why do we
voted.
have serial numbers then in the first place? Because we're
The
talking
serial numbers are so you can track your ballot accountability report. How many ballots did that precinct receive?
Yeah.
How many ballots were voted and how many ballots are unused?
And the way you're telling that is by a serial number on.
Yes. The stub, on the stub.
Yeah.
On the stub. Because we get all that back. We get all the stubs back. Unused, used, partially used, we get it all back.
The stub is not specifically tied to the ballot. Does that make sense?
If I knew we were going to get into this discussion, I would have brought something with me to show you.
Because what Rob was just saying, it's like when you're buying tickets from the kid who's selling wrestlers who are selling raffle tickets. You got a stub here and you got a ticket here. This has got it. This has got a number and this has got a number. That's not the way does the ballot? No. So while we're just. So maybe some of the folks who were talking about having this numbers could clarify that issue for me, because now I see we're talking about opportunity, but they don't really match up to a particular. I'm flying here. I hope is there somebody that can fix this?
May I go?
Yeah.
So some more clarification that I forgot to speak to earlier was we did schedule this meeting back when we took all this up, just so no matter, and I believe everybody worked hard and the clerk's office was super on the up and up, but no matter what, there's room to improve. And that's why this meeting was here tonight. We're not, just so anybody that may have been upset that thought maybe we were here to change code tonight or even consider that and go away from the hand count. That was never the thing. We're here tonight so that we can improve our systems, right? And this is why the conversations are taking place. So in the public comment, but we're getting rid of the machines, and I'm damn glad we are, but because there's an opportunity to cheat, right? I'm no tech wizard by any means. I've said that a lot, but I'm all for doing anything to increase voter confidence. I'm glad and integrity. I'm glad that we had our highest voter turnout in the history of the Matsu Borough this year, on a year when the state had arguably their lowest ever percentage wise, right? So we're doing something right. We're taking steps in the right direction. But I would be very cautious to pursue any road that may lead to even the ability for somebody to know how someone else voted. If we're going to chase that path, I'm all for it, but I need like some 100% guaranteed that there's no way someone could do that, or that people at the clerk's office, the person who requests an absentee ballot probably does so every election, right? My dad is physically at that point where he's starting to do it right now. So I imagine most people that request absentee maybe create a pattern of it, right? They do it as they get older, whatever it may be. But if the clerk's office could look at that and say, all these people went out, okay, we sent out 1,000 absentees this year. And when they would be very easy for someone here at the borough to remember those serial numbers and then look at how they voted later and say, I don't really like how those 68% of people vote. So maybe they're absentee ballot. And I'm not saying this would happen. I'm just saying we're getting rid of the machines because of the potential. Does that make sense? I don't want to create any other potential. So I'm open to all ideas. Technology is not my strong point. There's a lot of really bright minds up here and in the room. I'll look at that with you guys if you want, but I will not be able to support anything that creates a potential for knowing how someone else voted. Because if there's potential, there will be cheating. There'll be a new type of cheating.
So let me just ask, the folks who want it, Brian or somebody, tell us why what that will accomplish for the process to have these serial numbers on the stub and I'm going to ask Brian. I'd like that, Brian, to go ahead.
Should we take a 10-minute break? Would that be okay? Can we take a 10-minute break or recess?
Let's go and take a recess here.
Yeah, I'll do
till
that.
4:45, and then whatever people that wants to on the assembly
Yeah,
can
I'll go
talk
talk
to
to
the
Fran.
individuals. Okay, so we're at ease.
Go see the coaches. Go see the coaches.
You almost need to have the ballots. I should have brought a sample ballot, and everybody up here could see what you're talking about, because they get confused between.
Back to order, please. So I'm go ahead and call the meeting back to order, and Madam Clerk, let's see, let me ask, yes, Assemblyperson Hale, please.
Yeah, I just want to address Assemblymember McKee's point real quick. Even if the serial numbers were printed upside down on the ballot, there's nothing preventing anyone from looking at that serial number. And if you're 5 people in front of me and I get ballot 1305, then I know that you got ballot 1300. And if I have access to that ballot, I can see how that ballot be compromised. I think any type of opportunity for the secrecy of the vote to be compromised would fail a constitutional challenge.
Okay, Assemblyperson Nowers, did you? And then Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, I had a couple of clarifying questions. So did the borough put a Dominion machine for sale on the website?
To Assemblymember Nowers, no, we lease these machines. I couldn't legally sell these machines. Purchasing has nobody in the borough has access to the voting equipment other than the clerk's office. And we have no access to put things out for sale.
Okay, that's a relief. I'm glad we're not doing that. To also clarify, when a machine says not accepted, my experience when I went to the hand count was often, or more often than you would think, somebody would fill in 2 candidates for the same race, or they would leave a race completely blank. They didn't, we had a question about shooting and ranges, and people just decide not to vote on that one. And so the machine is saying, oh, there's no vote in this this race. Did you mean to? So I just wanted to clear, that was my understanding of why the machine sometimes will say, do you want to take another look? I'm not sure if the gentleman who was raising that question is still around, but I thought that was worth clarifying.
To Assemblymember Nowers, you're correct. The machine is telling you on this race, you might have marked too many people, it's overvoted or it's undervoted. It's giving you the opportunity to fix that.
Okay.
It counts everything else that you voted only one person, or how the directions told you to vote.
Okay, thank you. And the other thing I saw in hand counting is people would do a write-in candidate. They would fill in the bubble that they wanted to vote for a write-in candidate and not write a name, or they would not fill in the bubble that they didn't want to do a write-in candidate and then write names like Santa Claus. It was amazing what you see. So, but I had 2 things I wanted to speak to. One is something Assemblymember Yunt mentioned. You know, the state roles are out of our control, but I do think election integrity is something that's so important for our bodies that we can be a voice if we don't think the roles are being updated. So at the very least, urging the state to get the voter rolls cleaned up. And I can see we received, and I think these are probably at the back of the room, but we received a page sheet that explained the division elections has a process for removing people. If they don't vote for a certain amount of time, they get a letter. If they don't get any response from that letter and they haven't voted in a next general election, they send them another letter and then they can take them off. I guess my impression from looking at voter rolls is I feel like the ball gets dropped, like there's a process, but it's not, there's not enough people in the office, or it's not getting followed through with, because I feel like I see people on the rolls who haven't voted for a long time. And I do want to err on the side of caution to not take people off if they're interested in voting, but I do think this assembly could consider supporting some of the legislation that would just automatically take people off if they haven't voted in 3 elections, and maybe do away with the additional burden of notification, because people move out of the state. So you're sending a letter to somebody who doesn't exist anymore. Actually, one more clarification. So on the absentee ballots, does the state send unsolicited ballots to people? Or do you have to sign up, or does the state send a letter asking you to request an absentee mail ballot or a ballot to people if they have not requested one for absentee ballot?
I'm going to ask Ms. Hussman to correct me if I'm incorrect. You'll have to come up here. I can say what I think, but I'd rather you tell them, Julie.
For a voter to be able to receive an absentee by mail ballot, they have to apply for it. There's an application. It becomes available online January 1st or in the offices to apply. The only time we have ever sent out ballots was the June 11th when we had the primary special election for Don Young's position. And that was the only time we've ever done a by mail. And that's when a ballot was sent to every registered voter.
Okay. Do you send requests for mail-in ballots?
No.
To people? Okay. So they have to start that
They apply.
process.
The only thing we will send out, we have what we call, it's a list of like PAV, permanently absent voters lists if they live out in an area where we do not have a voting place, or if they have said, let's say, I know somebody had said later that their dad now always does absentee. So we'll mark them as a disability, meaning we send out information of how they can acquire a ballot. They still have to fill out an application. Okay, but that's the only thing other that we send out.
Okay. And if people die and they send you a certificate, is that automatically should that automatically pull them off the rolls?
Yes, it
Okay.
should. And that is validated. The Health and Vital Statistics do a monthly information of people that have died. But I mean, in the one situation I was hearing, it was in another state that they died. They died in Texas. We don't automatically know if a person who was registered here in the state of Alaska, if they died in Texas and that's where they live now, or they are visiting whatever, we are told that they have passed away.
Okay.
Okay.
And then the state, I had heard at one point, nobody brought it up here, but somebody said that if you go to DMV and you get your license and you can also register to vote.
That is
when you
correct.
do that, that there's a little screen that you sign your signature on, just like at the grocery store where we all just do whatever, the machine doesn't care.
Correct.
Are we using that? Is the state using that for the verified signature
We don't verify signatures.
if you are doing a mail ballot?
We don't verify signatures. We go by identifiers
Okay.
and witnesses.
Okay, so that's not being used for any sort of confirmation?
Because we are not trained as people to verify people's signatures.
Okay. And then, thank you. That was all from the state. I really appreciate that.
Could I ask before she leaves, could I ask her a question before she leaves, or do I call her back? How do I do that?
She can come back up.
Oh, all right.
How many more questions do you have?
I just have one. So back to our procedures of hand counting at the precinct. So we're going to give the number of ballots in the ballot box to the counters. We have a list of how many people signed the register. So say we got 300 people sign the register and there's 160 ballots in the ballot box. What's to keep those people counting from finding 20 they don't like the vote of? They just toss them and then they say, well, I guess some people just decided not to vote. Like, how do we know that? How do we keep that from happening?
Well, I think it could happen. I mean, if you're talking about potential, of course it's potential. Anything can potentially happen. So if you have people that are going to be that want to do something that is not legal, they're going to have to get the other two people on the counting team to go ahead and do it with them.
I get that. I guess with the machines, that would be hard to do because the ballot went into the machine and you have a count. So
You
it
do.
says there were 140 ballots that went through this machine. So you can't just arbitrarily toss 20 out without there being some kind of check on that. And somebody else here mentioned having different points to check things. That's how you catch fraud. So in this case, what would be our procedure? What would be our catch for that to not happen?
I can tell you that the election officials, the precinct election officials that are not necessarily doing the tabulation on the ballot accountability report, they have to also write down how many people signed that precinct register. If we say that 310 people signed the precinct register and we have 350 ballots, that's a problem. So the years that we're with the state, and it was much better this last year than it was the first year. When we're with the state, we have people that sign the precinct register that don't end up voting a borough ballot. So we generally, if we say that if 10 people didn't vote a ballot, we have 10 unvoted ballots. So we know 10 people did not vote a ballot. They signed the register, but they didn't vote. But what else happens is that, mind you, it's years that we're with the state because it's so busy. People will want the state ballot. They'll also get the borough ballot, and then they throw ours away. They leave with it. It was the first year we were with the state, that was a big problem. But our precinct officials reported those things because they'd find things in the trash. This last election, it was much better. So the canvas board tries to go through all of that and tries to code if those numbers don't match, they do their best to try to figure out what happened. They start calling the election officials that served there.
Deputy Mayor, okay, no, because he had asked and then I jumped over him for Stephanie, but thank.
So Stephanie asked my question earlier about death certificates, but so they sign the register and then they get a ballot, and not everybody actually votes the borough ballot. So I'm sure quite often you have less of them than you had signatures on there, right? Say maybe 200 people signed, but you only had 195 votes. Do we ever have them where there's more? Because to me, that would be concerning. But do we ever have a larger number than?
So you're saying, so we only had 198 signatures, but we had 200 ballots.
Correct. Did that happen at all this year?
I can't think of a time that has happened.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Assemblyperson Hale.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I did have another question for Mrs. Hussman, I believe it was. But first, I kind of want to build on what Stephanie was mentioning there. That particular reason that there are going to be most times fewer ballots in the ballot box than people that sign the register is the reason that I think that we should have the number of ballots counted by the precinct officials before they hand them down to the people who are going to count the actual votes. It's much like the ballot accountability tapes that they pull from the machines that tell them there's this many ballots that went into the machine. We want to know how many ballots went into the box so that some might not be misplaced in order to change the results of the election. I think that one of the persons who spoke was pretty clear about that. And I think that in all of this that you have put together for us, which is very good, I think that's really the only weak point that I can see. And then for Mrs. Hussman, it shows here on your list maintenance process that basically after 4 years of not voting or appearing to vote, contacting a division, a person is removed from the rolls. Is that
They're made
accurate?
inactive. Okay, they're made inactive. And so then during that time, they're inactive, but if they should vote, then they would be an active voter again. But then if another 2 elections go by and they go through the system, then they are permanently removed from the voter rolls.
So within the preceding 4
So
calendar
basically it can
years,
take 8 years.
it basically takes 8 years.
Mhm.
Okay, that was my question.
If you hear
because
not, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
There's-
because I knock on a lot of doors. I knocked on like 2,512 doors last fall, and many doors have people listed there that don't live there. And you say, "Oh, you know the Bowers?" And you're like, "Mrs. Bauer," and they're like, "No." And you're like, "Okay, Mrs. Frank? Yeah, that's me." I'm like, "Do you know the Bowers? Do you?" And they're like, "No, I never heard of them." So it is, I think, one of the ways that the state could improve on the voter rolls. So thank you very much.
And that should go through, I mean, that's why people need to speak to their legislatures on things, on these items.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's not up to you guys, it's up to the legislature. So thank you.
Yes, Assemblyperson McKee, go ahead.
Yes, I had a question for you as well, a couple of them.
Sorry, Julie, you should sit right there.
That's what I'm here for.
Yes. I was reading on here on voter qualifications, it says state law allows voters to remain residents for, thank you, for voting purposes as long as they intend to return to Alaska. Is there like a time limit on there? Like 14 years later, I finally get back here? Is there, what do you do with
No,
that?
not to my knowledge, no.
So there's no time.
Mm-mm.
Oh dear, that could be really bad, especially since the rolls are kind of iffy already.
I would agree, but I also, if a voter is somewhere and they want to, whatever where they're at the time, they want to vote, they should be voting in the area that they would want to have their representation at.
I just think it's not too much to ask, that they.
No, I agree. And like, again, that's why I say you need to speak to your legislatures. And like you were saying, something as a group going towards as an assembly, promoting whatever you'd like to see changed, that's where it begins.
And then my other question, I see Todd is here as well. I'm assuming that there was a massive jump in people who were registered because they got automatically registered when they got registered with got signed up for the PFD. So that must have just exploded the mess. I'm going to use the word, I don't know another word to use right now. The problems on the rolls. Has that occurred? Because I would think it would have.
Well, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but there also is, if a person does not want to be registered to vote, they receive a card if they're a new voter saying, would you like to opt out? Or if there's a change to a voter's residential address versus what's on their voter record and what they provide with their PFD application, there is a card that is sent out. And it's an opt-out card, and if they do not want to be registered to vote, they may at that time return the card saying they do not wish to be registered to vote in the state of Alaska.
I'm a teacher and accountability is a huge thing. And I'm thinking that sometimes we dilute that and saying it's your responsibility as a person to do this. And so a lot of people see something, state of Alaska, chuck it in the garbage. So is there any move afoot anywhere to stop automatic registration with the PFD? Because if people really want to vote,
I know that there has been various things in the legislature and also as far as where it is located when a resident of the state of Alaska goes to complete their voter application, as far as when they go on to the website stating, do you want to register for the state of Alaska?
Mm-hmm.
So I know that various legislative bills have been out there. Okay, but it hasn't, at this point, it has not changed.
Yeah.
Because that was, again, a ballot measure that was voted and approved by the people of the state of Alaska.
Yeah, true that.
Okay.
Well, maybe that wasn't a good idea. Thank you.
Julie, before you leave.
Yes.
Yeah, you just as well move up a chair or something. Anyway, to me, it seems like to me there, and maybe if you do have some standard operating procedures where you cross-reference or audit the ERIC with the permanent fund, because it seems like to me, just reading this, information where ERIC, helps to update or remove people, but yet then when you blend the PFD in, they put that person back in or something. So do you have some procedures where you do some auditing of that at all?
Not at the level that I'm at, but if there's information I could get to you to send you, I will gladly do that.
So they do further up someplace else?
Yes,
Yeah.
it's within the division, but it's not within my position that I have as a region election
And
supervisor.
is that information available so we could take and check to see, if there's a 5% or a 0% or a 50% discrepancy there over, say, the last 4 years or something?
if Lonnie could go ahead, if you want to get that information and the question and send to me, and I can send it further on.
Okay,
Okay?
all right. It just seems like to me there would be some stuff there that could very easily be problematic. And Assemblyperson Nowers, you had some more questions?
I'll let you off the hot seat for this question. This is back to our borough procedures, and I just wanted to throw out something to get the Lonnie's opinion on. And it's something I wonder about because I watched the hand counting process, and I know some of the people out here did too. And what I saw was very diligent teams, but they, even in the half an hour I was in there, questions would come up. Often they were just basic, but Lonnie and Sonia and her team were able to reassure the counting teams that they were doing it correctly. It might be an undercount, it might be a no count. And so the way we changed this was to have the hand counting at the precincts. We're not going to have cameras there, that just because of the security, and it sounds like there's a constitutional issue too. So is there a reason with the security that we can't count the number of ballots there and then package those up like we have done in the past? They're in a sealed bag with the signature on them and bring them back here, so you've got hand counting teams and you are able to supervise them. So I just like, if you could compare the two processes for me, the pluses and minuses you see of having the hand counting at the precinct versus the hand counting at the borough.
To Assemblymember Nowers through the mayor, I would love to have the opportunity to have the ballots come back here, have the hand counting teams in a location, and do it all election night. I see the reason why people would want to do that at the precincts, because then it's done and they can call it in. But I of course, with anything, I have concerns that maybe they're going to run into an issue. They make the wrong decision on how to count a ballot, because there are legal ways you need to count the ballots. So I do have concerns that maybe some of the numbers won't come back accurately. I would prefer to have supervisory abilities to be able to see what's going on. But I will do exactly what the assembly directs me to do.
Yes, Assemblyperson.
So
Go ahead.
what is the reasoning why we wouldn't have cameras at the hand count?
There is a state law and borough code that says all those election materials are private. You cannot be broadcasting them out there on a screen.
What if
You
you-
look puzzled. Do you want the attorney to
Yeah, I
give you
think the
chapter and
the
verse?
attorney might be able to explain it
Yeah,
better than I.
Yeah, he can give you chapter and verse there.
Election materials are confidential by law, so that's everything. And both the state law and the borough code basically have the same provisions. So, for example, under state law, it says the director may permit the inspection of election materials on a call of the Congress, because the state runs the national elections, the state legislature, or the court. So if somebody wants to review the materials, they can't unless their Congress, state legislature, or the court says, bring them here. And then we have much the same in our code at 25-35060, which basically says unless there's an election contest going and whoever's performing the election contest needs to do it, or the assembly is performing the inquiry, or a court asks to produce them, they're not public materials. And so what you'd be doing is you're videotaping, you would be videoing things that are not public documents. Well, then what are you going to do with that video? You can't broadcast it and you can't give it out.
Going to be held until somebody has a question or something to be reviewed?
First of all, to what end? Then why video it, right? Because if you're going to say, well, we want to go back and see how you counted. Remember, the hand counts in this prior election verified 100% that all the ballots issued were voted and counted. The ones that went in the voting machine got spit back out and then went back in the voted machine were counted properly because they were all hand counted and we had 100% match. And so what would be the purpose of videoing something that you then can't give the video to anybody except the court if you have a lawsuit?
Right. I was just trying to, the voters' trust is the,
Right, so, and that gets a little bit back to what Assemblymember Young was talking about with confidentiality. You want voter trust? Have everybody stand in a room and stand up one by one and say who they're voting for. Now we know how the vote was. You have somebody up the front of the room tabulating votes. The problem is you have a constitutional prohibition on knowing how other people voted. It's prohibited by the Constitution to determine how someone else voted because we're mandated to provide for secrecy. And remember, we're the only state in the nation with a Supreme Court that said our right to privacy is so powerful you get to have marijuana at home. So.
Assemblyperson Hale, I think, and then McKee.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to address Assemblymember Nauer's suggestion about bringing the ballots back to the central location and the counting there. When we first were talking about this particular ordinance that we eventually adopted, that was brought up. And Assemblymember Sumner mentioned that, you know, when you're moving the ballots from the precinct to the central location without counting them first, you're now introducing an opportunity for those ballots to be tampered with. And I thought that was a pretty darn good argument. And that's why one of the reasons that I supported the hand count at the precinct.
The count at the precinct, is that what you just said? Yeah, okay.
Assemblyperson McKee, you have.
Yeah, I would like to speak to that as well, because what if, you know, you got them all boxed up, you send them to a car, in somebody's car and they, without an armed guard and all that, there's somebody, they have an accident, maybe the car is totaled, what do you do? You don't have, everything from that precinct is gone. So I think counting them at the precinct, I don't know how all that works, but it seems to me that would eliminate those very possible things, especially, you know, wintertime boats, roads are icy and blah, 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 or whatever. It could be fraud or it could be an accident. In both ways, it's a done deal. And the other thing I was going to ask Nick, so when you're saying, quoting this statute, that basically renders null and void the opportunity to, the ability to put up to video things, because you're never going to be able to see them anyway, unless it's that limited. Yeah?
I would advise you against doing it. Your attorney, you get 4 votes and no mayoral veto, you're the borough assembly, you get to enact whatever laws you deem fit. In my opinion, this one would bear significant risk of being in violation. And if you had a public records request or a request from anybody to see the video, I would advise the manager or the clerk or whoever's in possession of the video, because it would probably be the IT department, to not release it.
Because you couldn't, of course.
And all you're doing is setting then a false expectation.
Yeah.
And why go down that road?
Because your statute prohibits that being released to anybody but whatever those 3 entities that you named. Is that right? So I couldn't just come up and say, hey, I'd like to see this video. I voted there. You couldn't do that.
If that happened, I would advise the manager or the clerk to not release the
Yeah,
video.
well, then that's kind of a done deal.
Okay. I see 2 lights here. Are you guys doing follow-up or just forget the light? Okay. All righty. Assemblyperson Nauers, go ahead. Oh, okay. Deputy Mayor.
I'm really glad we scheduled this meeting. We've had a lot of forward momentum tonight. It's been a good 6 months as far as I'm concerned, with the election integrity and all of it together. I don't know that necessarily it should end tonight. A lot of valid concerns. I think we should consider updating our legislative priorities and asking the state to update its voter rolls. It's one thing I wanted to note. And the other thing is we may consider putting together a working group to review our SOPs and our, you know, how we do things too. This was a lot to take in at one time. The clerk's office did a great job. I felt like the hand count went really well. It's going to be counted in 41 locations this year instead of 1, which I too am happy about. I think it's safer to count them at the precinct level, but I do think maybe we should consider a working group and just making sure we're ready to go come November. So that's all I got. Thanks.
Go ahead, ma'am.
To the assembly, there was one more change it's a bigger change for this year. And especially when we're with the state, the Canvas Board is having a really hard time making sure we are done in time. And I do know we have at least 2 members that if they have to work the hours they worked this last election, they won't be coming back. So we need to make sure we have trained people in our canvas board. So what I'm going to do this year is we're going to have our main canvas board. They're going to still do it the ballot accountability reports. They are going to canvas the absentee, but I'm going to have a second canvas board come in to canvas the question ballots. Now the continuity will be off a little bit when we do this process, but I want to start it this year. So if any quirks we find, we can fix them before the 2024 special election. One of the issues, and I'm going to have the canvas board come in either February or March so we could talk about the process that we're going to use. But we find double voters when we're looking at people that voted early or question or absentee in person or absentee by mail. We've got to come up with a process to find those double voters.
Okay, Assemblyperson McKee, go ahead.
Talking about having that other team come in, the suggestion had been made that you have a group of people who are going to work there for, I don't know, 8-10 hours, whatever the heck it is, and then have a whole nother team come in and relieve those folks and have the next team take over. Why is that not a good idea? Because by 10 o'clock at night, I'm seeing double. So why would that not be a good idea?
Because Sonia and I also can only work so much, and I've only got so much staff that is trained and paid to do the level we do at elections.
That's here, as opposed to being out at the precinct.
Yeah, this is the canvas board that's doing all of the work at the end, looking at all the precincts, the ballot accountability reports. They're canvassing the absentee ballots and the question ballots.
I'm just in agreement with Rob. I think this should not be this is a work in progress and isn't something that should be, settled on tonight. I think there's still too many questions. At least for me, there is. Thanks.
All righty. Is there further comments? Or further discussion? Okay. So are we ready to move on to comments then? Okay. Go ahead, Assemblyperson Hours, if you apparently have a comment.
I just wanted to thank Ms. Husband for coming and spending her night here. Really appreciated that, since there's a lot of overlap in terms of the questions that have come to us. And I really appreciate the clerk for putting this together for us. I do agree with Assemblymember Yunt that we should take a look at updating our legislative priorities, and getting the voter rolls cleaned up, I think would be great, and how we help division elections do that. And I also agree of the working groups, not a bad idea. There's two things I'm kind of mulling around is, one, that's a lot of extra people to get. I think it's doable, but just, having the reassurance that we can get, I think it was like 120 people, especially in some of those communities that have less folks. And then another thing we didn't discuss that I had asked about, but we weren't able to get information on, is, does a machine exist that is just a tabulator? We don't need the fancy T111 calculator, that can do all these things, but does a machine exist that just is a tabulator, cannot hook up to the internet? Is there an option out there, and would it be reasonable economically? Because as you can see, the hand counting is $50,000 a year cheaper almost than the Dominion lease. So I just hope we could kind of continue down that road and see if it's a dead end, or if there's possibilities that we might want to talk about.
Okay. Deputy Mayor, comments?
Same comment I had when we were worried about this 4, 5, 6 months ago. Would we be able to come up with enough people? 27 grand is 49 grand less than 76. So if we're concerned that we may not be able to, let's just increase the pay till we find them.
Madam Clerk, parting comments? Major? Assemblyperson Benair, you have parting comments? No? Okay. I'll come back to it. Assemblyperson Hale.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I also would very much like to see us look into what it would cost for a very simple tabulating machine. You just run through, it counts the number of ballots. It would help, I think, at the canvas board to make sure that the number of ballots that we're reporting and the number of ballots that we're counting the votes on are the same as the number of ballots that we said came out of the ballot box. So,
Can I ask him a question?
Sure.
To Assemblymember Harrell, you're just talking about a machine that's going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I would not be opposed to a machine that also did a second count verification of the votes on those ballots, but for certain, just to run the ticket to make sure that the number of ballots matches at every point through the process.
Assemblyperson 2, comments? Assemblyperson McKee, comments?
Briefly, just, I think the tabulating machine, just straight tabulation, may even eliminate the need for the serial numbers because it's, it's counting it here and it's counting it here and they match up. And if they don't, then you go back to it again. So I like that idea. And one other thing, we had a lot of testimony saying to us, why are you not honoring what we asked you to do, which is with the hand count? And it's been locked down, nailed in. That's what we're doing. So I don't know why that misconception was still out there. And I appreciate everybody's passion because if I thought it were, I'd be here too. But I hope everybody's mind has been laid to rest. We do hand counts here. That's what we do. We don't Dominion. In fact, how can you like chop up an old Dominion or what do you do? Have a bonfire burning? I don't know. But whatever it was, to tell the people we ain't doing this anymore. Apparently we didn't
We
get that
put
word
it
out.
on the surplus sale.
No,
There you go.
we leased the equipment and you could not put it up for a surplus sale. So.
Attorney, parting comments? No, okay. So I will adjourn the meeting at 5:24.
And dinner is in the side room, everybody.